Narcissistic grandma locks baby in closet to teach lesson, revenge from enraged parents. Hi everyone, I'm Emma, 28F, and this is a story about the fallout from my narcissistic mother's, 52F, actions towards me and my husband Jake, 30M. For some background, my mom has always been extremely controlling and manipulative. She tried to dictate every aspect of my life growing up, from what clothes I wore to what extracurricular activities I did. When I met Jake in college, she immediately disliked him because he was encouraging me to be more independent. She saw him as a threat to her control over me. Despite her objections, Jake and I got married right after graduating. This caused a huge blowout fight where she accused me of abandoning her and betraying the family. After the wedding, my mom refused to speak to me for over a year. Jake and I tried to reach out and repair the relationship, but she rebuffed all our efforts. We decided to start trying for a baby, hoping that becoming a grandma might soften her attitude. Sure enough, when I got pregnant, my mom suddenly wanted back in my life. She love-bombed me with gifts and affection. I was naive enough to think she had changed. Jake was more skeptical, but I convinced him to give her another chance. Big mistake. As soon as our daughter Lily was born, my mom went into total grandmazilla mode. She demanded to be at our house constantly to help with the baby, which really meant criticizing our every move as parents. If we set any boundaries, she'd throw a tantrum about being pushed away from her granddaughter. Things came to a head when Lily was about 6 months old. I was struggling with postpartum depression and my mom insisted on taking Lily for a weekend to give me a break. Against my better judgment, I agreed. When we went to pick Lily up, something seemed off. She was acting differently, more clingy and withdrawn. Over the next few days, I noticed other changes. She started having separation anxiety when I was out of the room. She stopped sleeping through the night like she had before. Jake and I were extremely worried. We took Lily to her pediatrician, who examined her and asked some careful questions. Based on her answers and symptoms, the doctor said it seemed likely that Lily had experienced some kind of trauma that weekend. She recommended we look into counseling for Lily and try to figure out what happened. Sick with worry, Jake and I grilled my mother about what went on that weekend at her house. At first, she just denied that anything was wrong. But we kept pressing, and eventually, the truth came out. It turned out my mom had a sick, twisted plan to try to turn Lily against me. She told Lily over and over that I didn't really love her, that I wished I'd never had her. She let Lily cry for hours without comforting her, telling her this is what you get from your selfish mother. She even went so far as to lock Lily briefly in a closet to show her what abandonment feels like. Jake and I were absolutely horrified. I'll never forget the smug look on my mother's face as she admitted what she'd done. She truly thought she was teaching Lily a twisted life lesson. I completely lost it when I heard what she'd done. Screaming, crying, I ordered her out of our house immediately. Jake had to physically restrain me from attacking her. My own mother had deliberately traumatized my 6-month-old baby in some kind of sick power play to try to turn her against me. It was unforgivable. My mom just sneered at me. "Don't act so shocked. You're the one who abandoned me first by getting married and having a baby. I'm just making sure Lily knows who really loves her most in this world." Jake kicked her out while I collapsed into tears, devastated that my own mother could be so twisted and cruel. We knew we could never allow her access to Lily again after this. Who knows what other mind games she might try to play. But simply cutting her off didn't seem like enough justice for what she'd done. Over the next few days, blind rage kept building up inside me. How dare she terrorize my innocent baby daughter just to hurt me? Lily had started waking up with night terrors, screaming and inconsolable. It broke my heart to see how deeply my mom's sick lessons had scarred her. Jake was just as furious, maybe even more so than me. "We can't let her get away with this," he kept saying over and over. "She needs to pay for what she did to Lily." Part of me agreed, I wanted vengeance. But the more rational part of me worried about escalating the conflict even further with my unstable mother. In the end, my thirst for justice won out over being the bigger person. My mom had shown no remorse at all for her actions. If she couldn't feel guilty, then by God I'd make her feel something. After a lot of discussion and planning with Jake, we decided to go scorched earth on my mom. We got in touch with a really vicious divorce lawyer and laid out everything my mom had done, the abandonment threats, the emotional abuse of a baby, all of it. The lawyer's eyes went wide. She said she'd never heard anything quite so depraved. She drew up a massive lawsuit hitting my mom with charges of emotional distress, alienation of affection, and a bunch of other torts. We also filed reports with both the police and Child Protective Services about her behavior with Lily, providing documentation from Lily's doctor and a child psychologist we'd taken her to. The evidence was damning. My mom knew the law better than anyone. She was a retired family court judge herself. She had to know she was in very real legal jeopardy, especially with the risk of having her actions flagged as child abuse. We hit her with the lawsuits and reports at the same time, so she got slammed from all angles at once. I'll never forget the look on her face when she opened the door to be served with a 50-page civil summons. All the smug arrogance just drained from her expression, replaced by pure shock. She called me immediately, screaming about how I was a monster destroying her legacy. I just calmly read excerpts from her own statements about depriving Lily of affection and locking her in a closet. Pretty hard to claim judicial temperament after that, don't you think, Your Honor? I sneered. As expected, she lawyered up hard, hiring an ex-colleague to defend her. But we'd made sure to document everything impeccably. My mom's own narcissistic hubris had led her to confess all her crimes against Lily in detail. She was boxed in with no way out. While the civil case lumbered on, the criminal investigation into potential child abuse charges against my mother heated up considerably. They interviewed Jake, me, Lily's doctor, the child psychologist, even Lily herself using special procedures. My mom started panicking, realizing she could be facing jail time. In a desperate move, she actually tried filing for emergency grandparents' visitation rights, claiming Jake and I were alienating her from Lily out of spite. The judge took one look at the compiled evidence, including my mom's own recorded confessions, and rejected her motion as frivolous. If anything, it just made her look worse in the eyes of the law. Jake and I used the opportunity to submit a permanent restraining order against her, prohibiting her from coming within 500 feet of Lily or us. We got it granted temporarily based on her patterns of threatening behavior and psychological abuse. My mom was going nuclear, but we were riding the legal shockwave straight towards her. Realizing her legal situation was turning into a quagmire, my mom started going to more extreme and underhanded measures. She had always been wealthy from her judicial career, and she started throwing that money around to harass and intimidate us. Strange people started showing up taking photos and videos of Jake, Lily and I whenever we left the house. We constantly received letters, emails and calls at all hours from fake identities detailing all of our comings and goings. It was clear she had hired private investigators to stalk and unnerve us. She also tried sabotaging us financially. Using her legal background, she filed bogus complaints alleging misconduct against both of our employers. We started getting calls from our bosses asking WTF was going on. Jake actually got temporarily suspended from his job until they looked into it. Things escalated even further when my mom took out a full-page ad in the local newspaper airing her entire deranged side of the story. She claimed Jake and I were unstable, unfit parents who were punishing her for trying to save Lily. She positioned herself as the wounded party just looking out for her grandchild's welfare. Jake's family, who lived nearby, started getting harassed by hanging up calls and people prowling around their property at night. It didn't take long to realize my mom had put her pygoons on them too. The absolute biggest escalation was when we found out she had filed bogus charges alleging Lily was being abused and neglected by us. Child Protective Services was forced to open an investigation, sending a caseworker to our home on multiple occasions to interview us and inspect our house. This was the thing that made me realize my mom had gone fully unhinged. After everything she did to terrorize and traumatize Lily, she had the gall to try portraying us as the abusive, negligent ones. I knew right then and there that we had to crush her utterly by any means necessary. In the end, we were able to write out all of my mom's harassment and dirty tricks by documenting everything meticulously. Her lavish spending on pies and online defamation provided clear monetary damages for us to sue over. The child neglect charges were immediately dismissed as vengeful fabrications by the caseworkers. With so much evidence stacked against her, including her own admissions, my mom's legal defenses started crumbling. The divorce lawyer she hired abandoned her case, realizing it was a moral and professional dead end. Without effective counsel, she compounded her own liability by missing deadlines and ignoring court orders. After several years of drawn-out litigation, the hammer finally dropped. My mom was found liable for over $1.2 million in damages due to the emotional trauma she inflicted on Lily, Jake, and me. The court also made a formal legal determination of parental alienation and child psychological abuse against her. In the criminal case, she ended up taking a plea deal to avoid potential jail time. She was sentenced to 5 years probation, court-ordered therapy, and permanent termination of grandparent rights. She was also banned from going near Lily or contacting anyone in our family. With the massive monetary judgment against her, my mom had no choice but to file bankruptcy and liquidate most of her remaining assets. The expensive house, lavish retirement accounts, It all got foreclosed on and drained to pay down her court debts to us. After a lifetime of wealth and status, she was left relatively destitute in her later years. Beyond the financial penalties, she suffered crushing damage to her reputation. The horrible details of her emotional abuse towards a baby were heavily covered in local media. My mom, once a highly respected judge, became a public pariah. She was essentially cancelled in our city based on her own reprehensible actions. Her remaining friends and former colleagues turned their backs in disgust. She got forced out of her country club and professional legal associations. Even her own siblings cut ties and disowned her, appalled that she would traumatize her own grandchild. My mom spent decades cultivating power and status, only to watch it all get razed by her own narcissistic arrogance. In retrospect, I can see it was necessary for the legal system to come down on her with full force. If the punishments hadn't been so sweeping and devastating, her massive ego would never have learned its lesson. She had to lose everything before she could face any accountability. Of course, no amount of money or social banishment could ever truly compensate for the severe emotional trauma my mom inflicted on Lily. Those twisted lessons she tried to teach left deep psychological scars on my baby girl. We had to put Lily through years of intensive therapy and counseling to help her process the trauma and feelings of abandonment. It was absolutely gutting to see my happy, outgoing little girl transformed into an anxious, fearful shadow of herself. For a long time, she suffered from terrifying nightmares, separation anxiety, and was afraid to let me out of her sight. She became clingy, shy, and mistrustful of anyone besides Jake and myself. The therapist said Lily's trauma bonded her even more strongly to Jake and I, since we were the sources of safety and comfort amid the horror she experienced, but that overprotective insularity made it extremely difficult for her to create bonds with anyone else, teachers, friends, etc. Rebuilding Lily's ability to trust took years of intensive family therapy. We had to work through her deep feelings of abandonment and communications issues. Slowly, incrementally, we were able to help her understand what happened wasn't her fault or because of anything she did. Regaining her self-confidence and joy has been a constant struggle. Even though Lily is doing much better now at 8 years old, you can still see flickers of trauma and anxiety pass over her face in certain situations. My heart breaks knowing my own mother, fueled by narcissistic hatred and jealousy, inflicted such deep psychological wounds on her grandchild. No punishment could ever be enough for that. At the same time, I do take some solace in the sheer, overwhelming degree of ruination we were able to rain down upon my mom. By weaponizing the legal system against her, we were able to leverage her own wealth, status and hubris to destroy everything she'd built in life. Through her own taped confessions, she sealed her legacy as a monstrous child abuser. She's now in her 60s, disgraced and destitute, with all remaining family ties severed. With the restraining orders, she cannot come within 500 feet of Lily to inflict any further damage. The revenge we enacted was as absolute and obliterating as it could possibly be within the justice system. Jake and I got catharsis by ensuring my mom reaped the full consequences of her depravity. I just wish it could undo the trauma she caused Lily. So that's the sprawling saga of dragging a narcissistic and abusive grandmother through the full nuclear fires of legal and social immolation. I know this revenge tale was harsh, but my mom left us no other choice with her actions and continued vindictive escalations. At least we were able to give Lily the priceless gift of never having to see her tormentor again.